I think most people would agree that upon the commencement of the fight between Gojo and Sukuna, the Culling Games arc is technically over. But even though the Culling Games will still continue, I thought it would be nice to look at the strongest sorcerers and courses we were introduced to in this arc. Of course, these characters must have also been participants in the Culling Games to be ranked. Because Jujutsu Kaisen is not as straightforward as most other battle shonens like Dragon Ball, I'll be placing the characters in a sort of tiers where they can be interchangeable with one another, and I also do my best to give my reasons for my placements on the list. At the lowest spot, I'll be having Kurorushi. Kurorushi is a cursed spirit born from the fear of cockroaches. Kurorushi is very difficult to kill as the insect that she is. The other players in Sendai Colony actually acknowledge its strength, even though it was ultimately put down by Yuta Okkotsu. Kurorusu mainly shapeshifts its body for combat. We've seen it use its body as an extension to form weapons, but like curses, Kurorusu is subject to death by reverse curse technique. It can create offsprings that can attack independently. It can also fly as well as separate into minute swarms to attack its opponent. It's very difficult to take down Kurorushi, as if even one of the roaches survive, it's able to regenerate itself. I honestly think Uro is not too far off from Kurorushi. Uro is a sorcerer from the Heian era who we meet at Sendai Colony. Her curse technique, Thin Icebreaker, allows her to turn the sky into a surface. She can use this to distort space around an opponent or even redirect and reflect attacks thrown at her. Uro is capable of flying, and at Sendai Colony, we saw her hold her own effectively against the duo of Yuta and Rika. Uro also has a domain expansion which we haven't actually seen, but the fact that she's still alive, we might just see the domain expansion sometime in the future. And I personally think she and Kurorushi can be swapped, as their placements are debatable. However, the next player I feel is on a different level compared to them. Ishigori is a Culling Game player from the same time period as Kashimo. Ryu Ishigori boasts the highest cost energy output in all of history, including that of the Heian era, the peak of Jujutsu, and that's saying something. Ryu Ishigori is a player we met at Sendai Colony. His cost technique is known as Granite Blast, which allows him to shoot large bursts of cost energy from his hair. Ryu is able to curve and change the trajectory of said blast. But even besides his cost technique, Ryu is actually a very capable fighter when it comes to hand-to-hand combat, as he was able to fare very well against Yuta Okkotsu. Yuta being someone who was able to throw hands with Yuji being the standard for good combatants when it comes to hand in Jujutsu Kaisen. Ryu's Granite Blast was also able to pretty much one-shot Uro when it actually hit. That just goes to show why he's placed ahead of her in this list. And just like Uro, Ryu has a domain expansion which we never got to see, and we probably won't get to see it since it's currently out of commission. And just like I stated earlier, Ryu's hand-to-hand is nothing to scoff at, as he was able to eat multiple punches from Rika but also fend off with some of his own. Ryu literally had Rika flying. He was only bested because of Yuta's ingenuity. That would not be the last time we would see Ryu, as Ryu would actually come in contact with Sukuna, and it would be here that he would meet his demise. Ryu would actually go on to be cut down by Sukuna's curse technique. If you ask me, that's not too bad of a way to go down. After all, Sukuna is who he is. The only reason why Uro is still alive is solely because of the fact that she chose not to stand in the way of the king. The next set of sorcerers that I would say are probably within the same range of power would be Yoruzu, Kashimo, and Hakari. But in my opinion, Hakari is the weakest of the bunch. Hakari is basically just your average JJK brawler. But what makes Hakari so strong is his domain expansion, the ideal death gamble. If you're expecting me to somehow explain Hakari's domain expansion, then I'm sorry for you, because I'm not the guy for that kind of thing. However, what Hakari's domain actually grants him access to is what makes him so strong. Hakari's domain expansion grants him access to an unlimited amount of cost energy supply for 4 minutes and 11 seconds. This infinite amount of negative cost energy will then go on to multiply itself to produce reverse cost energy. And because of this, not only will Hakari have unlimited amount of cost energy for 4 minutes and 11 seconds, but he would also have reverse cost technique for the aforementioned time, making him effectively unkillable. However, it is hinted that reverse cost technique can be negated by destroying the head, as the head is the source of reverse cost technique. Hakari is able to beat a Culling Game player with the ability to see seconds into the future, and yet some people think he isn't broken enough. Hakari also has Yuta's statement of Hakari on a roll being stronger than Yuta himself is. However, where we actually got to see Hakari Hakari's shine was when he fought Kashimo. Kashimo is a reincarnated sorcerer in the Culling Games, a sorcerer who majority of the fan base believe he overestimates himself, as Kashimo is actually stupid to want to fight the king of curses, or he's that much powerful. Upon Kashimo's reincarnation into his new body, he forms a binding vow, one that prevents him from using his curse technique to maximize its efficiency and power. Reincarnated Kashimo is capable of using his curse technique just once, and he plans to use it against Sukuna. If not for the fact that Hakari had access to reverse curse technique, he would have died multiple times in his encounter with Kashimo. Kashimo was basically able to one-shot Panda in what was arguably his most powerful core. And even though Kashimo doesn't have access to his curse technique except that one time, Kashimo does not just throw hands, as his cursed energy has a property of its own. Kashimo's cursed energy is electric in nature, meaning if he were to punch you, you would feel a jolt of electricity accompanied with it. It's unconfirmed what Kashimo's one-use curse technique is, and it's also unconfirmed whether he has a domain expansion or not. Depending on what his one-use curse technique would be revealed to be, he might actually be more stronger than we all gave him credit for. Enough with Kashimo, let's move on to Yuzu. Yuzu, just like Uro, is a Culling Game player from the Heian era. Her curse technique allows her to control liquid metal, which she's able to use for both offense and defense. She, like most of the other Culling Game players, has just one fight which we can use to scale her. Yuzu finds herself fighting 15 fingers Sukuna, but something important to note is that Sukuna never uses any of his original curse techniques in this fight because he has his reasons. Sukuna faces Yuzu solely with the tools granted to him by the 10 shadows. The fact that Yuzu was able to last as long as she did against Sukuna is just a testament of how strong she actually is. Yuzu's curse technique is not a very efficient one, so her ultimate tool in combat is her bug armor. Her bug armor is a durable one, as she's able to take multiple hits from some of the top tier Shikigami the 10 shadows have to offer. And unlike all the other characters on this list, Yuzu's domain expansion has been revealed. The 3 layers of affliction domain expansion has a sure hit which many characters will not be able to counter, and if not for the presence of Maharaga, it could have also been challenging for Sukuna himself. I don't have more to say about Yuzu. I'll be moving through the next 4 as fast as I can because they don't really need much explanation about their strength. Yuta was able to fight 4 special grade opponents back to back without any break, one of these special grade opponents being confirmed to be a top tier from the Heian era. Yuta was then able to impress Ryu Ishigori. Yuta was able to beat Druv with relatively no difficulty, and then go on to impress Ishigori with how strong he was. Yuta also walked out of Sendai Colony, acquiring 2 new curse techniques. He was able to copy Druv's Shikigami and Uro's skybending manipulation ability. Moving past everything Yuta accomplished in the Culling Games, we have Kenjaku. Kenjaku didn't have any fights with a Culling Game player, so to say. Kenjaku is confirmed to be a Culling Game player because he has a Kogane present. Kenjaku also stated it himself that he is not the game master of the Culling Games. It's safe to assume that Kenjaku would be this high based on what we saw him do against Yuki, Choso, and Tengen. But what's beyond Kenjaku will be Meguna. Like I stated earlier, Sukuna fights Yuzu. Sukuna, being the person he is, honestly doesn't need any explanation as to why he's this high. But why isn't Sukuna the number 1 on the list? First of all, I want to preface the fact that I don't think Gojo is a Culling Game player because we never got to see him with a Kogane. The strongest Culling Game player, no joke, is Takaba, a Culling Game player with the curse technique known as Comedian. The narrator says it himself that Comedian might actually be a curse technique to rival or surpass that of the Limitless, and that's the 10 strongest Culling Game players. I hope I didn't miss any of the strong players. I didn't include Maki because the barriers don't count her as a player, but rather they treat her as an object. I'm not the best when it comes to power scaling, so I'd like to see what you all think about this in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, then please feel free to leave a like. If you have something to say, then put it in the comments, and if you want to see more videos like this from me in the future, then please feel free to subscribe.